014 hours. The Northern Persian Gulf. There is a specific kind of silence that exists in the minutes before a sequenced military operation begins. The kind where every system is live, every crew is at their station. And the only thing that has not yet happened is the first irreversible action. That silence ended 11 minutes ago when the first Tomahawk Block V left the vertical launch cells of the USS Gravely and began its 83-minute flight toward the Iranian coastline. The weapon is subsonic. It is patient. It does not hurry. It simply moves at 550 miles per hour toward a set of coordinates that will no longer exist as functional military infrastructure by the time daylight touches the Zagros foothills. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders inside the hardened operations centers at Bandar Abbas do not know the Tomahawks are already in the air. They will not know until it is too late to matter. And that gap between when the first weapon launched and when the target understands it has been struck is not an accident. It is the entire architecture of what is about to happen. To understand why the next 90 minutes will cost Iran 4 decades of strategic investment, you have to understand what Iran built and why they believed it was untouchable. The Iranian air defense and coastal denial network is not a collection of isolated weapons. It is a layered system designed by engineers who studied every U.S. air campaign since 1991 and built their defenses specifically against the attack patterns those campaigns revealed. The Bavar 373 long-range surface-to-air system covers the outer envelope. The Khordad 15 medium-range system fills the gaps between Bavar batteries. Legacy S-300 PMU-2 installations anchor the most critical nodes. The Noor and Qadr anti-ship cruise missile batteries in the limestone revetments above the coast cover the maritime approaches. The fast attack boat fleet in the hardened pier shelters covers the surface. And beneath all of it, buried in the volcanic rock of the coastal mountains, the subterranean missile cities store the reserve arsenal that Iran and the system covers every altitude band. It covers every approach vector. It was built to make any conventional air campaign so expensive in aircraft and pilots that no American president would authorize it. On paper, it works. On paper, it represents 40 years and an estimated $100 billion in acquisition, construction, and maintenance costs, making it one of the most expensive area denial architectures ever assembled by a non-superpower military. On paper is not how the kill web fights. The first layer of what is about to happen did not begin with a missile. It began 72 hours ago when U.S. Cyber Command and Space Force initiated what the operational plan designates as the isolation phase. Not a broad internet blackout that would be visible to every signals intelligence service watching. Something more precise. Targeted degradation of the specific military data links that allow the Bavar batteries to share targeting data with each other, the encrypted fiber connections that let the Khordad operators receive cueing from the national air picture, the satellite uplinks that give the coastal missile battery commanders their over-the-horizon targeting feed. Each link degraded individually, subtly, at a level that looks like equipment malfunction rather than attack. By 0100 hours tonight, the Iranian air defense network is still physically intact. Every radar is still spinning. Every missile is still in its tube. Every commander is still at his console. But the network is no longer a network. It is a collection of isolated nodes that can see their own sector and nothing else. The battery commander at Bandar Abbas does not know what the battery commander 20 kilometers north is tracking. The Coastal Missile Battalion does not know whether the contact on its screen has already been identified by the National Air Operations Center as a friendly aircraft or a decoy. Each node is making decisions in information isolation, which means each node is making decisions with an incomplete picture. A wall is only as strong as its ability to see. The isolation phase does not destroy a single piece of Iranian hardware. It makes every piece of Iranian hardware functionally blind to everything outside its own sensor footprint. At 0145 hours, the ADM-160 MALD decoy drones enter Iranian airspace. The miniature air-launched decoy is a $35,000 expendable aircraft designed to do one thing with precision: mimic the radar signature of a far more expensive combat aircraft. Its Lüneburg lens and carefully shaped airframe return a radar cross-section consistent with an FA-18E Super Hornet. To the Iranian radar operators staring at their displays, the picture that appears at 0145 hours looks like a large-scale American strike package pushing inland from multiple vectors simultaneously. 50 contacts. Spreading. Climbing. Closing. Here is the trap. The Iranian battery commanders have been trained for decades on the doctrine that hesitation in the face of an incoming strike package is fatal. You engage immediately, before the weapons are in range, because a missile that waits for positive identification is a missile that fires too late. The doctrine exists for good reason. Against a conventional strike package of manned aircraft, it is correct. But the Iranian operators who are watching 50 contacts appear on their screens tonight have no way to confirm whether those contacts are $35,000 decoys or $100 million bombers. Their communications with national headquarters are degraded. Their lateral data links to adjacent batteries are down. They are alone with their radar picture and 40 years of training that says engage now. They engage. The Bavar and S-300 interceptors climb into the night air, chasing contacts that do not care whether they are intercepted. Each Iranian interceptor costs between $2 and $4 million. Each decoy it destroys is worth $35,000. The exchange ratio is approximately 80-1 in favor of the side that launched the decoys. But the economic loss is secondary to what each launch reveals. Every time an Iranian battery switches its fire control radar to high-power continuous emission mode to guide a missile toward a target, it is broadcasting its precise location on frequencies. The F-35C Lightning II aircraft orbiting at the edge of detection range are passively recording with centimeter-level accuracy. The Iranians are firing into the dark. The F-35S are simply listening, mapping, cataloging. By the time the Iranian batteries have expended their ready interceptors against decoys, the kill web has a complete updated targeting picture of every active radar position in the coastal defense network. This is what the operational plan calls the revelation phase. Iran's defensive reflex has just written its own targeting list. At 0212 hours, the F-35Cs move from passive collection to active suppression. The aircraft carry AGM-88G Advanced Anti-Radiation Guided Missiles, a 4-mode seeker weapon that represents the definitive answer to the question Iranian engineers have been trying to solve for 30 years. How do you protect a radar from a missile that tracks radar emissions? The AGM-88G answers the question by removing the assumption that the radar has to stay on. It features passive radar homing for initial acquisition, GPS-assisted inertial navigation for mid-course guidance if the radar turns off, and an active millimeter-wave terminal seeker that finds the physical structure of the radar installation regardless of whether it is emitting. There is no configuration of radar behavior that defeats all 3 modes simultaneously. If the Iranian operator leaves the radar on, the missile follows the beam. If the operator turns the radar off, the missile holds the last known coordinates and then finds the antenna structure with its own sensor. The only option is to abandon the position entirely, which removes the radar from the network and achieves the same result as destroying it. Paired with the AGM-88G strike is the EA-18G, Growler's next-generation jammer, which operates not as broad-spectrum interference, but as a precisely targeted electronic intrusion into the specific receiver architecture of each Iranian radar type. The NGJ does not create clutter on the Iranian displays. It saturates the receiver with a signal so precisely calibrated to the radar's own operating frequency that the display shows nothing but white noise at maximum power output. The radar antenna is physically undamaged. The operator is sitting in front of a screen that has become a blank wall. Functionally, the result is identical to destroying the radar. The Bavar operators cannot see. The S-300 operators cannot see. The Cordot batteries that were designed to fill the gaps between the larger systems cannot see. The Forbidden Fortress is a blind giant, and the Tomahawk missiles that left the USS Gravely 81 minutes ago are now 4 minutes from the coast. The Tomahawks arrive at 0304 hours. They do not need to maneuver around air defenses because there are no functioning air defenses left to maneuver around. They fly direct routes at minimum altitude, following the terrain contours of the Iranian coastline into the approach corridors that lead to the tunnel entrances and ventilation shafts of the subterranean missile storage sites. These are not the hardened main blast doors. Those doors are designed to survive near-miss detonations from conventional weapons. The Tomahawk Block V warheads are not aimed at the doors. They are aimed at the ventilation infrastructure, the power distribution nodes, the emergency access shafts, and the tunnel entry points where the rock and concrete are thinnest. A subterranean facility that cannot ventilate, cannot receive power, and cannot move vehicles in or out of its access corridors is not a functioning weapons magazine. It is a tomb with sealed doors. The missile cities do not need to be destroyed. They need to be rendered inert. The Tomahawks accomplish this in a window of 40 seconds across. Simultaneously, the B-2 Spirit bombers that have been holding their release orbits at 52,000 feet for the past hour begin their final weapons employment sequence. The GBU-72 Advanced 5,000-pound penetrator is a 2.5-ton steel rod designed to enter reinforced concrete at terminal velocity and reach the chamber below before its delayed fuse initiates. Against the hardened storage facilities for the Noor and Qatar anti-ship missile inventories, the weapon does not simply create structural damage. The detonation inside a sealed chamber containing fueled missiles produces a pressure event that the facility's engineers never designed for. Because the engineers who designed the facility assumed the weapon reaching the interior would be a failure mode, not a planned outcome. The chain reaction from the stored missile propellant in the primary coastal battery revetments above Bandar Abbas registers as a 3.1 magnitude seismic event on monitoring networks in 3 adjacent countries. The coastal missile inventory that Iran intended to use against the carrier strike group is gone before any of its launchers receives a fire order. The IRGC commanders watching their operations boards cycle through red status indicators in sequence do not yet understand the totality of what has happened. They understand that they have lost radar coverage. They understand that their communications with subordinate units are degraded. They understand that there have been large explosions at the storage facilities. What they do not yet understand is that these events are not separate problems. They are 4 phases of a single sequence that was designed to reach this moment where the Iranian military is left with weapons it cannot target, launchers it cannot communicate with, and a defensive network that has been systematically disassembled from the outside in, using Iran's own defensive reflexes as the mechanism. They issue the retaliation order anyway, because the only alternative is to do nothing, and doing nothing is politically impossible. From the mobile launchers that survived the penetrator strikes and the coastal battery positions that were not in the primary targeting package, the IRGC fires its remaining ready inventory. Fateh 110 short-range ballistic missiles on pre-planned trajectories toward coalition airbase coordinates in the region. Shahed 136 loitering munitions on one-way missions toward naval assets in the Gulf. It is not a coordinated strike. It is a simultaneous release of whatever assets remain with functioning launch capability, aimed at target coordinates that were pre-programmed before the engagement began, without updated targeting data, without fire control radar coverage, without any communication between the units executing it. The coalition air defense response does not strain. The Aegis combat systems aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln Strike Group, operating with SPY-6 radar data fused across 4 ships through the Cooperative Engagement Capability Architecture, generate intercept solutions for every inbound track before the first weapon has traveled a third of its flight distance. The SM-6 interceptors handle the Fateh 110 ballistic threats in their terminal descent phase, where their radar cross-sections are largest and their energy margins are fully committed. The rolling airframe missiles and evolved Sea Sparrow rounds handle the cruise threats. The Phalanx systems handle the Shahed loitering munitions. Not one Iranian weapon reaches a coalition asset. The retaliatory salvo that was supposed to demonstrate that Iran retained meaningful offensive capability demonstrates precisely the opposite. That a military whose targeting systems have been blinded and whose communications have been severed cannot effectively employ its weapons regardless of how many it fires. By 0337 hours, the Persian Gulf is quiet. The Tomahawks have completed their runs. The B-2S have turned back toward their bases. The F-35Cs are recovering fuel from tankers in the holding orbits. The EA-18G Growlers have reduced their jamming output to monitoring mode. And the USS Abraham Lincoln's flight deck, which never altered its operations tempo during the entire 96-minute engagement window, is launching the first reconnaissance patrol of the morning cycle to begin battle damage assessment. Now look at this from the distance. That lets you see the full shape of what happened, because the individual events do not capture the scale of the strategic outcome. Iran spent 4 decades and $100 billion building a military architecture based on one foundational assumption: that the United States would fight the way it fought in 1991, in 2003, in 2011. That it would lead with large formations of identifiable aircraft, that those aircraft would be detectable by the radars designed to find them, that the surface-to-air missiles designed to intercept them would have enough time and communication support to engage effectively, and that the depth and hardening of the subterranean infrastructure would absorb whatever penetrated the air defenses and survived to strike. Every system in the Forbidden Fortress was built against that model. The Bavar was built against the F-15. The subterranean storage was built against the GBU-28. The fiber optic communications network was built against signals intelligence that targeted radio emissions. None of those systems encountered the threat they were designed to defeat. The Bavar encountered decoys worth less than a single interceptor and was tricked into expending its magazine against them. The subterranean storage encountered a penetrator designed 20 years after the bunkers were built, with a terminal velocity and fuse delay engineered specifically against their actual construction specifications. The fiber optic communications network encountered a cyber degradation operation that targeted the digital protocols running on those fibers rather than the physical infrastructure itself. Every countermeasure Iran built was obsolete before it was tested. Every capability the coalition deployed was developed after Iran finished building the thing it was designed to defeat. The economic accounting requires no calculation to understand. Iran spent $100 billion. The coalition expended an estimated $430 million in ordnance. Iran lost the coastal missile inventory, the early warning radar network, the subterranean storage infrastructure, and the fast attack boat fleet that was neutralized by the LRASM autonomous strikes on the pier facilities before any of the boats could get underway. The coalition lost 0 aircraft and 0 crew members. The ratio is not an expression of superior firepower. It is an expression of superior sequencing. The lesson that every military planner in Beijing, Moscow, and Pyongyang is currently extracting from what happened tonight is not about the weapons. It is about the order in which they were used. The Tomahawks launched first because they are slowest and needed the most transit time. The decoys launched second because their job was to drain the Iranian interceptor inventory before the suppression phase began. The electronic warfare activated third because its job was to blind whatever radar survived the depletion phase. The suppression missiles flew fourth because they had precise targeting data from the passive collection the F-35S performed during the revelation phase. The penetrator bombs struck fifth because by the time they arrived, there was nothing left to shoot them down. Remove any one step and the chain fails. Execute all 5 in the correct sequence, and the wall does not simply fall. The wall dismantles itself, using its own defensive responses as the mechanism. Iran had the weapons. Iran had the wall. Iran had 40 years and $100 billion. What Iran did not have is the only thing that mattered in the end: the sequence. The carrier strike group continues its patrol through the Strait of Hormuz. The shipping lanes are open. The tankers are moving. The insurance markets will process the implications of tonight's engagement in the first trading session, and the risk premium on Gulf energy shipments will adjust accordingly. The world that woke up this morning to news of what happened in the Strait of Hormuz is the same world it was yesterday, except that the military architecture that was supposed to make that strait too expensive for the United States to control has been demonstrated in a single 96-minute window to be neither invulnerable nor irreplaceable. The Forbidden Fortress is a graveyard. The kill web is already repositioning for the next patrol. And somewhere in a hardened government facility in Tehran, The strategic review of what went wrong is beginning. It will take years. It will be detailed. It will be thorough. And it will reach conclusions that are too late to apply against the adversary that made them necessary. If you want to understand the sequencing doctrine behind what you just heard, and why executing these 4 phases in any other order would have produced a completely different outcome, subscribe. We break down how the kill web actually thinks, not the version that appears in press briefings. And tell me in the comments, which of the 4 phases was the most critical to the outcome? The isolation phase, the revelation phase, the suppression phase, or the penetrator strike itself? Make your case. There is a correct answer, and it is not the one most people pick. The scenario described in this video is a technical and tactical analysis based on real military assets, published defense specifications, and documented regional tensions. The specific operational sequences are hypothetical dramatizations created to illustrate U.S. military integrated strike doctrine, kill web architecture, and multi-domain operational sequencing.